The business class cabin of Skyline Airlines Flight 743 from New York to Los Angeles buzzed with the quiet murmur of privileged passengers settling into their premium seats. Maya Johnson, a 28-year-old black woman, gently bounced her 8-month-old daughter Zoe in her arms, trying to soothe the baby's growing fussiness. The infant's cries echoed through the cabin, growing louder with each passing minute. "For crying out loud!" The sharp voice of Mr. Williams, a 50-year-old white businessman seated nearby, cut through the air like a knife. "Can't you control your child? I paid good money for business class to have peace and quiet, not listen to this racket." Other passengers began turning in their seats, shooting disapproving glances toward Maya. She felt their stares burning into her as she continued trying to calm Zoe, whispering gentle words and rocking her softly. The commotion caught the attention of Jessica Wellington, the head flight attendant, a 35-year-old woman with platinum blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. She approached Maya's seat with measured steps, her expression already showing clear irritation. "Ma'am, could you please quiet your child?" Jessica's tone was condescending, her eyes scanning Maya from head to toe with obvious disdain. "You're disturbing our first-class passengers." Maya looked up politely, exhaustion evident in her voice. "I'm so sorry. She's hungry, and I was wondering if I could prepare her bottle. I have everything I need right here." Jessica's lip curled into a sneer as she took in Maya's simple clothing and the crying baby. "I think there's been some mistake here. Business class is reserved for, well, a certain caliber of passenger. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in economy where crying babies are more common." "Excuse me." Maya's voice remained calm despite the insult. "I have a valid ticket. Would you like to see it?" The cabin fell silent as other passengers strained to hear the exchange. Jessica's face flushed red with anger at being questioned. "Don't you dare talk back to me!" Without warning, Jessica's hand flew across Maya's face with a sharp crack that resonated through the cabin. "People like you always think you can talk your way into places you don't belong." Maya clutched Zoe protectively, her cheek stinging from the blow. But as she held her crying daughter, she glanced down at her purse where a special credit card lay hidden, a card that would soon change everything. The weight of the secret she carried suddenly felt heavier than ever. Maya's mind drifted back to her childhood in Detroit, where she had been raised by her beloved grandmother Annie after losing both parents in a car accident when she was just 7 years old. Annie Johnson worked multiple cleaning jobs to put food on the table and keep their small apartment warm during harsh Michigan winters. Despite their financial struggles, Annie had always emphasized the importance of education and dignity. "Maya, baby," Annie would say as she helped with homework late into the night. "Your brain is your ticket out of here. Don't you ever let anyone make you feel small because of where you come from or what you look like." Those words had carried Maya through her scholarship years at Harvard Law School, where she often felt like an outsider among her wealthy classmates. But she persevered, driven by her passion for civil rights law and her desire to help people who couldn't help themselves. After graduation, she dedicated her career to defending the underdog, immigrants facing deportation, families losing their homes, workers being exploited by powerful corporations. 2 years ago, at a charity gala for underprivileged children, Maya had met David Chen, the CEO of Skyline Airlines. What started as a conversation about educational inequality had blossomed into an unexpected romance. David, a second-generation Chinese-American who had built his father's small charter business into a major airline, was immediately drawn to Maya's intelligence and compassion. Their relationship had developed quietly, away from the public eye. When David proposed after 8 months of dating, Maya had accepted but insisted on keeping their marriage secret. She feared the media attention, the scrutiny from David's wealthy social circle, and the potential impact on her work with vulnerable communities who might lose trust in a lawyer married to a corporate CEO. Hidden in her purse was the platinum credit card David had given her. Mrs. Maya Chen, CEO spouse, embossed in elegant lettering. She had never used it, preferring to maintain her financial independence. Also tucked away was their marriage certificate, folded carefully in her wallet. David had insisted she carry it for protection, though Maya had never understood what he meant until now. Their modest apartment in Brooklyn was a far cry from David's Manhattan penthouse, but Maya preferred it that way. She continued her work at the Legal Aid Society, taking on cases that paid little but meant everything to the families she helped. David respected her choice, though he worried about her working such long hours for so little compensation. 75-year-old Annie, now living in a Los Angeles care facility, had been Maya's biggest supporter, but also her greatest source of guilt. "Maya, honey," she had said during their last phone call, "I understand why you're scared, but happiness can't be hidden forever. That man loves you, and you deserve to be proud of that love." Today's flight was meant to be a surprise visit to see Annie, whose health had been declining. David had insisted on booking business class tickets so Maya and baby Zoe could travel comfortably. Maya had hesitated, knowing it would draw attention, but David's concern for their daughter's comfort had convinced her to accept. Now, sitting in that business class seat with her cheek still burning from Jessica's slap, Maya wondered if her fears about being exposed had been justified all along. But as Zoe's cries intensified, maternal instinct took over. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about protecting her daughter and standing up to the kind of prejudice she had spent her entire career fighting. The slap seemed to unlock something vicious in Jessica Wellington. Her voice rose to ensure every passenger could hear as she continued her assault. "Security! We have a situation here with an unruly passenger!" 2 security officers appeared from the front of the plane, moving swiftly down the aisle. Maya's heart raced as she realized the gravity of her situation. Still holding Zoe, who was now screaming at the top of her lungs, she tried to maintain her composure. "Officers, this woman is clearly in the wrong section," Jessica announced with theatrical authority. "I suspect she's somehow obtained fraudulent tickets. Look at her. Does she look like she belongs in business class?" The older security officer, a heavy-set man named Torres, looked uncomfortable but followed protocol. "Ma'am, we're going to need to see your boarding pass and identification." Maya reached into her purse with trembling hands, careful not to disturb the items she wasn't ready to reveal. She handed over her boarding pass and driver's license, both clearly showing her legal name as Maya Johnson. Jessica snatched the documents before the officer could examine them properly. "Johnson, of course. Probably bought these tickets with stolen credit cards. It happens all the time with their kind." The racist comment sent a chill through the cabin. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably, while others nodded in agreement. Mr. Williams spoke up from his seat. "I told you she didn't belong here. These people always try to game the system." An elderly man named Robert Patterson, a retired pilot with 40 years of flying experience, stood up from his seat 3 rows back. "Now wait just a minute," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded aircraft for decades. "This young lady has been nothing but polite. There's no call for this kind of treatment." Jessica whirled around to face him, her eyes blazing. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you not to interfere with crew operations. This woman is disrupting our cabin and potentially traveling on fraudulent documents." "That's ridiculous," Robert protested. "I've been watching this whole thing, and the only person being disruptive is you." The confrontation was escalating beyond Jessica's control, but instead of backing down, she doubled down on her aggression. "Officers, I want this woman and her screaming child removed from business class immediately. Move them to economy where they belong." Maya finally found her voice, though it shook with emotion. "I have every right to be in this seat. I paid for these tickets legally, and I'm traveling with an infant who is hungry and tired. Instead of helping a mother with a baby, you're creating a scene." "Don't you lecture me about my job!" Jessica's voice reached a pitch that made several passengers wince. "I've been doing this for 15 years, and I know trouble when I see it. You people always play the victim card when you get caught." The second security officer, a younger man named Davis, looked increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. He had seen the boarding pass and identification. Everything appeared to be in order. But Jessica's seniority and aggressive certainty made him hesitant to contradict her. As the argument continued, other passengers began taking sides. A black woman named Janet Williams, traveling alone in seat 12A, watched the scene with growing recognition and anger, but fear of confrontation kept her silent. She had experienced similar treatment herself and knew how quickly these situations could escalate. Meanwhile, Lisa Chang, a 23-year-old flight attendant on only her second month on the job, approached quietly with a warm bottle she had prepared in the galley. "Mom," she whispered to Maya, "I thought your baby might need this." Jessica spotted the interaction immediately. "Chang, what do you think you're doing?" Lisa jumped back as if she'd been burned. I was just trying to help with the baby." "You were disobeying direct orders. This passenger is not to be given any service until this situation is resolved." Jessica's voice was deadly serious. "Do you want to lose your job over some stranger?" The young woman's face crumpled with fear and disappointment. "No, Mom. I'm sorry." She looked at Maya with apologetic eyes before hurrying away, leaving the warm bottle on the galley counter. Maya's heart broke watching the young woman being intimidated for showing basic human kindness. This wasn't just about her anymore. Jessica's behavior was affecting everyone around them, creating a toxic environment where fear ruled over compassion. The situation reached a new level of absurdity when Jessica demanded that Maya's diaper bag be searched. There could be anything in there. With people like this, you never know what they're capable of. As Officer Torres reluctantly began examining baby bottles and diapers, Captain Martinez emerged from the cockpit to assess the disturbance. Jessica immediately launched into her version of events, painting Maya as an aggressive passenger with fraudulent tickets who was disrupting the entire cabin. "Captain, I've been trying to handle this situation professionally, but this woman refuses to cooperate. She's clearly in the wrong section. Her child is disturbing other passengers, and she's become increasingly hostile when confronted with the evidence." Captain Martinez, a seasoned pilot who had seen his share of passenger disputes, looked at the scene before him. He saw a young mother clutching a crying baby, surrounded by security officers and crew members, while business-class passengers recorded everything on their phones. "Ma'am," he addressed Maya with a tired sigh. "I understand this is upsetting, but we need to maintain order on this aircraft. If there's any question about your seating assignment, perhaps we can sort this out once we land." Maya felt her last hope slipping away. "Captain, I have valid tickets. I haven't done anything wrong except travel while black with a hungry baby." The blunt statement hung in the air like an accusation. Some passengers looked away uncomfortably, while others scoffed at what they perceived as playing the race card. Jessica seized the moment. "There! You see? She's trying to make this about race when it's clearly about following proper procedures and maintaining cabin safety." Captain Martinez made his decision. "I'm sorry, Ma'am, but we're going to make an emergency landing in Denver. For the safety and comfort of all passengers, you'll need to disembark there." The announcement over the intercom minutes later sent shockwaves through Maya's system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be making an unscheduled stop in Denver due to a passenger situation. We apologize for any inconvenience." As Maya held Zoe close, tears streaming down her face, she whispered to her daughter, "I'm so sorry, baby. We're not going to make it to see great-grandma Annie after all." The weight of failure, humiliation, and righteous anger pressed down on her chest like a physical force. But in her purse, the platinum credit card seemed to pulse with possibility, and Maya began to realize that sometimes the truth has a way of revealing itself at exactly the right moment. As the aircraft touched down at Denver International Airport, Captain Martinez's phone began ringing with an urgency that cut through the cabin noise. The caller ID showed D. Chen, CEO, a number that commanded immediate attention regardless of the circumstances. "Martinez here," the captain answered, stepping into the galley for privacy. "Captain, this is David Chen. I need to know the status of passengers in business class, specifically a woman named Maya Johnson traveling with an infant." Captain Martinez felt his stomach drop. The CEO calling about a specific passenger could only mean one thing: he had made a terrible mistake. "Sir, we've had a situation with that passenger. We're currently on the ground in Denver, and she's about to be removed from the aircraft." "Removed?" David's voice carried a dangerous edge that every employee of Skyline Airlines had learned to recognize. "Captain, that passenger is my wife." The words hit Martinez like a physical blow. Through the galley entrance, he could see Maya still sitting in her seat, holding Zoe, while Jessica stood over her with obvious satisfaction. The pieces of a catastrophic puzzle began falling into place in his mind. "Sir, there must be some mistake. The head flight attendant reported issues with fraudulent tickets and disruptive behavior." "Captain Martinez." David's voice was now ice-cold professional. "I am currently watching a live stream of my wife being harassed on my own airline. I'm 20 minutes away from Denver Airport, and when I arrive, I expect a full explanation of how this situation was allowed to escalate." Maya, still holding Zoe in the cabin, reached into her purse with deliberate slowness. Every eye in business class watched as she withdrew the platinum credit card that had remained hidden throughout the ordeal. The metallic surface caught the cabin lights, and the embossed text, "Mrs. Maya Chen, CEO spouse," was clearly visible to nearby passengers. A hush fell over the cabin as Maya placed the card on her tray table, followed by her marriage certificate. The official document, bearing the seal of New York State and dated 2 years prior, showed the union between Maya Elizabeth Johnson and David Wei Chen. Jessica's face went from flushed red to paper white in the span of seconds. That can't be real. You're making this up." Maya reached for her backup phone, a device David had insisted she carry for emergencies, and dialed his number. The call connected immediately. "David," she said quietly, her voice carrying through the silent cabin. "The thing I was afraid of has happened." "I know, sweetheart. I'm almost there. Are you and Zoe okay?" The endearment, spoken in David's unmistakable voice and broadcast through the phone's speaker, sent shockwaves through every passenger within hearing range. Phones that had been recording the conflict now focused on capturing this stunning reversal. Officer Torres, who had been preparing to escort Maya off the plane, stepped back as if he'd been electrocuted. "Ma'am, we had no idea." Robert Patterson, the retired pilot who had tried to defend Maya earlier, stood up with his arms crossed and a look of vindication on his weathered face. "Well, I'll be damned. Looks like the only fraud here was the treatment this lady received." Jessica began backing away from Maya's seat, her hands shaking visibly. "This is impossible. She can't be. I mean, look at her. She doesn't look like someone who would be married to..." "To what?" Maya's voice cut through Jessica's stammering with laser precision. "Finish that sentence. I'd like everyone to hear what you really think." The challenge hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Around them, passengers who had been filming now realized they were documenting something much larger than a simple airline dispute. They were witnessing the exposure of institutional racism at 30,000 feet. Captain Martinez appeared at Maya's row, his face ashen with the realization of his error. "Mrs. Chen, I owe you a profound apology. I should have investigated this situation more thoroughly." Maya looked up at him with tired eyes. "Captain, I'm not angry with you for following your crew's recommendation. I'm disappointed that your crew created a situation where following their recommendation meant humiliating a paying passenger and her infant daughter. The distinction was subtle but powerful. Maya wasn't attacking the chain of command. She was exposing the prejudice that had corrupted it." Jessica, now fully realizing the magnitude of her mistake, dropped to her knees beside Maya's seat. "Mrs. Chen, please, I didn't know. I was just doing my job, trying to maintain order in the cabin. I have children of my own to support. Please don't let this cost me my career." Maya looked down at the woman who had struck her less than an hour ago. "Jessica, the problem isn't that you didn't know who I was. The problem is how you treated me when you thought I was nobody." David Chen's arrival at the aircraft was announced by the rapid approach of black SUVs across the tarmac, followed by a team of Skyline Airlines executives and legal representatives. When he boarded the plane, his presence seemed to change the very atmosphere of the cabin. Tall, impeccably dressed, and radiating controlled fury, he commanded immediate attention from every person present. "Maya," he said softly, approaching her seat with visible relief and anger warring in his expression. He leaned down to embrace both her and Zoe, his voice breaking slightly as he whispered, "I'm so sorry this happened to you. To both of you." The tender moment between husband and wife was captured by dozens of phones, but Maya seemed oblivious to the recording devices. For the first time since the ordeal began, she allowed herself to show vulnerability, leaning into David's strength as Zoe finally quieted in her arms. David straightened and addressed the cabin with the authority of a man accustomed to command. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am David Chen, CEO of Skyline Airlines. What you have witnessed today represents a complete failure of the values this company was built upon." Jessica, still kneeling near Maya's seat, began to speak desperately. "Mr. Chen, sir, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I was just trying to maintain cabin order. Your wife, the baby was crying and passengers were complaining and she seemed—" "Stop." David's single word cut through Jessica's rambling with finality. "I've reviewed the cabin audio recordings and witness statements. There was no misunderstanding. There was racial profiling, assault, and harassment of a passenger, who happens to be my family." Robert Patterson stood up from his seat, his 40 years of aviation experience lending weight to his words. "Sir, I watched this entire incident unfold. Your flight attendant's behavior was the most unprofessional thing I've seen in 4 decades of flying. This young mother did nothing wrong except travel while black." The blunt assessment from a respected industry veteran sent murmurs through the cabin. Other passengers began speaking up, their voices creating a chorus of accountability. "She slapped her," called out a businessman from row 5, "right across the face for no reason." "The baby was just hungry," added a woman from across the aisle. "Any mother would understand that." Janet Williams, the black woman who had remained silent during the initial confrontation, finally found her voice. "I've experienced this kind of treatment before on other airlines. The only difference is that Mrs. Chen had the power to fight back. The rest of us just have to take it." Her words highlighted the broader implications of what had occurred. This wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern that affected countless passengers who didn't have Maya's resources or connections. Jessica, sensing the tide turning completely against her, made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "This is all being blown out of proportion. She's playing the race card to get attention and money from the airline. Look at this whole setup. It's like she planned this whole thing." The accusation was so outrageous that it momentarily stunned the cabin into silence. Maya, who had remained relatively quiet during David's arrival, slowly stood up with Zoe in her arms. "Jessica," Maya said, her voice carrying the authority of a seasoned courtroom attorney, "I am a civil rights lawyer. I have spent my entire career fighting against exactly the kind of treatment you subjected me to today. Do you really think I would orchestrate my own humiliation and assault for publicity?" She gestured to the phones recording around them. "Every word you've spoken, every action you've taken has been documented by at least 6 different devices. I don't need to manufacture evidence of discrimination. You've provided it yourself." Maya pointed to the passengers around them. "I am a lawyer. I know what constitutes legal evidence. Every word you said, every action you took, has been recorded by at least 6 different phones. I don't need to create a case against you. You've built it yourself." Robert Patterson nodded emphatically. "I'll testify to everything I witnessed, 40 years of flying, and I've never seen anything so disgraceful. David stepped forward with a tablet in his hand. Jessica Wellington, you are terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from this aircraft and airport property. You are also banned from all Skyline Airlines flights pending a full investigation. No! Jessica's composure finally cracked completely. Please, I need this job. I have a mortgage, children in college. This was a misunderstanding. I'll do anything to make this right. Maya looked at the woman who had humiliated her and felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, but sadness. Jessica, I don't want to destroy your life, but I can't allow you to continue treating other passengers the way you treated me today. The next person might not have the resources to fight back. She turned to address the entire cabin, her voice growing stronger with each word. This isn't about revenge or punishment. This is about ensuring that every passenger on every flight is treated with basic human dignity, regardless of their race, appearance, or perceived social status. Young Lisa Chang, the flight attendant who had tried to help with the baby bottle, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. Mrs. Chen, I'm so sorry I didn't do more to help you. I was scared of losing my job, but that was no excuse for letting this happen. Maya smiled at the young woman with genuine warmth. Lisa, you showed kindness when it mattered. That bottle you prepared, it meant everything to me that someone cared enough to try. Captain Martinez, who had been standing silently throughout the confrontation, finally spoke. Mrs. Chen, on behalf of myself and this crew, I offer our sincerest apologies. There is no excuse for what occurred today, and I take full responsibility for failing to properly assess the situation. Maya looked at him with understanding. Captain, you responded to information provided by your crew. The failure wasn't in your decision-making. It was in the prejudice that corrupted the information you received. David wrapped his arm around Maya's shoulders as she delivered her final statement to Jessica. You asked me earlier if I looked like someone who belonged in business class. The question isn't whether I belong here. The question is whether you belong in a position of authority over other human beings. Today, you've shown that you don't. As security officers prepared to escort Jessica from the aircraft, Maya's words echoed through the cabin with the weight of absolute truth. Power isn't about having the right to look down on others. Real power is knowing when to lift others up. Today, you had the chance to help a mother with her baby. Instead, you chose to be a bully. That's a choice you'll have to live with. 6 months after the Denver incident, the video footage from Skyline Airlines Flight 743 had been viewed over 50 million times across social media platforms. The hashtag #SkylineStandards became a rallying cry for airline passenger rights, and Maya's calm dignity in the face of harassment inspired countless others to speak up about their own experiences with discrimination. Rather than seeking personal compensation, Maya had insisted that Skyline Airlines establish a $10 million fund for diversity training and anti-discrimination programs across the airline industry. The Maya Chen initiative became a model for other companies seeking to address systemic bias in customer service. David had offered Maya any position she wanted within Skyline Airlines, but she declined, choosing instead to continue her work at the Legal Aid Society. I'm not a corporate executive, she had told him with a smile. I'm a lawyer who fights for people who can't fight for themselves. That's what I was before I met you, and that's what I want to remain. The ripple effects of Maya's courage extended far beyond the aviation industry. Hotels, restaurants, retail stores, and service companies across the nation began implementing new training programs specifically designed to address unconscious bias and prevent discrimination. The Maya standard became shorthand for treating every customer with dignity, regardless of appearance or assumptions about their background. 3 major universities established scholarship programs in Maya's name, specifically targeting students from underrepresented communities who wanted to pursue careers in civil rights law. Harvard Law School, Maya's alma mater, created the Maya Johnson Chen Fellowship for students committed to fighting systemic discrimination in corporate environments. Jessica Wellington had been blacklisted from working in the airline industry, but after 6 months of court-mandated diversity training and community service, she had written a public letter of apology that was published in major newspapers across the country. "I spent years carrying prejudices I didn't even realize I had," she wrote. "Mrs. Chen showed me that my ignorance was no excuse for my cruelty. I hope my experience can help others recognize their own biases before they hurt innocent people." The letter led to Jessica becoming an unlikely advocate for anti-racism training, speaking at corporate events about the dangers of unconscious bias and the importance of treating every customer with respect regardless of appearance or assumptions. She worked without pay for the first year, donating her speaking fees to civil rights organizations, determined to make amends for the harm she had caused. Robert Patterson, the retired pilot who had defended Maya during the incident, became a volunteer advocate at airports across the country, helping passengers who faced discrimination file complaints with appropriate authorities. 40 years of flying taught me that aviation should bring people together, not tear them apart, he said in an interview. When I see injustice, staying silent isn't an option. His passenger rights network provided free assistance to travelers who experienced discrimination, helping dozens of people each month navigate complaint procedures and legal options. Lisa Chang, the young flight attendant who had tried to help with Zoe's bottle, was promoted to head of passenger services training for Skyline Airlines. Her experience witnessing the incident and her regret at not doing more drove her to develop new protocols, ensuring that crew members could intervene when they witnessed discrimination without fear of retaliation. Under her leadership, Skyline became the first airline to implement mandatory bystander intervention training for all employees. Janet Williams, the passenger who had remained silent during the original confrontation, started a blog called Flying While Black, where travelers shared their experiences and supported each other through difficult situations. "Maya's courage gave me permission to use my voice," she wrote in her first post. "We can't let fear of confrontation enable the mistreatment of others." Her blog became a resource for travelers of color, providing practical advice and emotional support for those facing discrimination while traveling. The legal changes were equally significant. Maya worked with congressional representatives to draft the Airline Passenger Dignity Act, which established clear federal guidelines for how airlines must handle discrimination complaints and required annual bias training for all customer-facing employees. The legislation passed unanimously in both houses, a rare moment of bipartisan agreement in an increasingly polarized political climate. Corporate boardrooms across America studied the Skyline incident as a case study in crisis management and the importance of inclusive company culture. Business schools added Maya's story to their curricula, using it to teach future executives about the financial and reputational costs of discrimination. The incident became required reading in diversity and inclusion programs at Fortune 500 companies. On a crisp autumn morning, Maya stood in the Los Angeles cemetery where her grandmother Annie had been laid to rest 1 month after the Denver incident. Annie had lived long enough to see her granddaughter's courage make national headlines, and her final words to Maya had been, "I always knew you were stronger than you thought, baby girl." The headstone bore Annie's name alongside an inscription Maya had chosen. She taught her granddaughter that dignity cannot be taken, only given away. Fresh flowers from admirers across the country often appeared at the grave, left by people whose lives had been touched by Maya's story. Maya placed her own bouquet of roses at the grave and whispered, "You were right, Grandma. Happiness couldn't stay hidden forever. But more importantly, you taught me that standing up for what's right is always worth the cost." She paused, watching as a Skyline Airlines plane passed overhead, its contrail drawing a white line across the blue California sky. The airline industry itself had been transformed. Passengers reported feeling more confident about speaking up when they witnessed discrimination, knowing that companies were now taking such incidents seriously. Flight attendants received better training on cultural sensitivity and conflict de-escalation. Airport security protocols were revised to prevent racial profiling. The changes weren't perfect, but they represented meaningful progress toward a more equitable travel experience for everyone. Children in elementary schools across the country learned about Maya's story in lessons about courage and standing up for what's right. Teachers used her example to show students that one person's bravery could change an entire industry. Young people of color saw in Maya a role model who had faced down injustice and won not through anger or revenge, but through dignity and determination. As Maya walked back toward the cemetery entrance, Maya's phone buzzed with a text from David. "Just saw the news coverage of your latest case. Proud of you for never stopping the fight. See you and Zoe tonight for dinner. Love you." She smiled, thinking about how their secret marriage had become a public symbol of love transcending racial boundaries. Maya climbed into her modest Honda Civic. She had refused David's offers of luxury vehicles, preferring to maintain her connection to the community she served. Through the window, she could see a Skyline Airlines plane ascending into the clear California sky, carrying passengers who would never know how a single mother's courage had changed the way they would be treated. At her legal aid office, Maya was reviewing the case of a family of refugees facing deportation when her assistant knocked on the door. "There's a young woman here to see you. She says she was discriminated against on a bus in Alabama and heard about what you did on that airplane." The assistant paused, then added with a smile, "And there are 2 more people in the waiting room with similar stories. It's been like this all week." Maya looked up from her files, seeing the hope and determination in the young woman's eyes that reminded her of her own journey. Outside her window, she could see a billboard featuring her photograph and the words, "Justice begins with one voice," part of a national campaign encouraging people to speak up against discrimination. "Send her in," Maya said, straightening her shoulders with the same quiet confidence she had shown on that airplane. "And call David. Tell him dinner might be a little late tonight. We have work to do." As the young woman entered her office, Maya reflected on how a single moment of courage had created countless opportunities for others to find their own voices. The legacy continued to grow. Maya's story had become more than just a viral video or a news headline. It had become a catalyst for systemic change that would protect millions of travelers for generations to come. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not for personal vindication, but for the strangers who will walk the same path tomorrow, now with the protection that one person's courage had created. And in legal aid offices, airport terminals, and corporate boardrooms across America, people remembered the lesson of Skyline Flight 743. That real power lies not in the ability to diminish others, but in the courage to stand up when diminishment occurs, ensuring that dignity and justice remain accessible to all. The question was no longer whether discrimination would occur, but whether enough people would have the courage to speak up when it did. And thanks to Maya's example, more and more people were finding that courage every day.